In a previous video, we talked about poor posture with the upper body. And what you'll tend to see when someone has poor posture in the upper body is they will also have poor posture in the lower body. Now, this is where you start to see a lot more variation. You can see what's called anterior pelvic tilt, which looks like a Donald Duck type posture, or you might see the opposite, a posterior pelvic tilt, which we call the Pink Panther. So while there are other types of poor posture within the lower body, these are the two that are most common, and that's what we're going to be focusing on. So with an anterior pelvic tilt, or a Donald Duck, where the hips are thrown back, and the ASIS, that's the hip bones on the front of the hips, are much lower than the hip bones in the back. This can cause a lot of problems with low back tension and low back pain. A person may also experience chronic tightness and tension in the quad muscles of the thigh, as well as the psoas and hip flexor muscles. And that is going to hold that person in this place. So when we are out of balance in our posture and we are tight in one area of the body, that is going to create a relative weakness or lengthening in the opposite side of the body. So with anterior pelvic tilt, we potentially have tight quads and tight hip flexors as well as a tight low back. But what's happening is the hamstrings, glutes, and lower abdominals are going to lengthen, and that is going to make them weaker over time. So the remedy for anterior pelvic tilt is to stretch what is strong and potentially tight, and to strengthen what is long and weak. So in this case, we would stretch the quads, stretch the hip flexors, and stretch the low back, and we would aim to strengthen our hamstrings, our glutes, and our lower abdominals. Now, this isn't going to be the same for each person. This is a general example, but if you have anterior pelvic tilt, taking these suggestions is a great place to start. When we have the opposite of an anterior pelvic tilt, and we are stuck in a posterior pelvic tilt, or a Pink Panther type posture, typically what's going on here is that the hamstrings and glutes are tight, as well as the lower abdominals and usually the upper abdominals, pulling that person into a position of flexion. When you have a posterior pelvic tilt, this is going to create a weakness in the quads and hip flexors potentially, and often you will also see these types of people with a flattened low back. So instead of having a curve in the lumbar spine, the hips get pulled underneath, which pulls the lumbar spine into a flattened position. And the reason that this can be dangerous or injurious is because when the spine is flattened out and it loses that curve, it encourages the discs that are between each vertebra to push back toward the epidural space and toward the spinal cord. And this is where you can experience bulging or even herniated discs. So it's very important to stretch the muscles that are tight on your body, that are potentially holding you in a position of faulty posture, and work on strengthening the ones that are longer and weak so that your body can maintain a new and healthier posture.